Good evening, everybody. It's good to see this crowd this evening. I want to welcome you to our Parents Unite event, sponsored by the Wyoming Liberty Group. We are recording on Facebook Live, so we'll just keep that in mind as we're going. We'll try not to forget them. We will do questions and answers at the end. Facebook viewers will be able to submit questions, and we will get those to our speaker so that she can answer them. Before we get started, we would like to just take a moment to recognize this date as the anniversary of the September 11 tragedy. We do want to say to the heroes that were lost at the Twin Towers, the Pentagon, and in Pennsylvania, to their families, we know they are missed, but they are not forgotten. To all of our first responders, we thank you for your service. And with that, I would like to introduce our guest speaker. Robin Bagley is the board chair for Parents for Choice in Education, Utah's leading advocate for choice in education and the most influential education advocacy organization for over a decade. Her leadership over a nationally recognized nonprofit has afforded her the opportunity to become well-versed and knowledgeable in national and state education policy issues. In her role as chair, she has successfully authored and advocated for innovative policy, most notably Utah's statewide online education program. Robin is an independent consultant and the president of Rethink Education. She is the founder and former principal of the innovative early college charter school, Career Path High, where students earn both their diploma and a career and technical certification, sending them out the door job ready. Robin has served as a member of Utah Governor Gary R. Herbert's Education Excellence Commission, the Digital Learning Council convened by Jeb Bush in 2011, the board of Utah Association of Public Charter Schools, and the governing boards of several online and blended learning charter schools. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Robin Bagley.
Thank you for that introduction, Kevin. I'm honored to be here. I'm very excited to come and share what we've learned in Utah and see if I can't help the parents of Wyoming do something similar and get involved in education policy. So before we get started, I just want to call on one or two of you and find out why you're here, what it is about education advocacy that interests you, and what you possibly want to do about it. If you don't mind, I don't remember, you introduced yourself when we came in. Tell me your name again.
I'm Daniel.
Daniel, would you mind standing up and just sharing?
The reason why I'm here.
Yes.
Well, I am running for school board, Laramie County School District 1. I grew up in the area and I've seen a lot of change in the way that kids are being taught. What I thought was effective growing up has been put to the side for something that I don't think is as needed as the programs that they put aside. So I'm interested in seeing what ideas you have. Very excited about it, actually. And then latching on to some of that, and perhaps if I win, implementing some of that in public school.
Wonderful. Yeah. Thank you. I want to pick someone over here. Would you mind if I called on you? Yes. Tell me your name. Linda.
This one?
Oh, hold on.
Okay. My name is Linda Rammel. I taught school for 13 years, and my last class I had 40 students in it in 5th grade. And I had 80 students I taught reading and science, and it was the last year I taught because the kids were not getting what they needed. This was not in Wyoming. I have grandchildren. My oldest daughter just started homeschooling. My husband's running for governor, and and we're really interested in the education programs that Wyoming has. When your SAT scores are way down here and the cost of education is way up here, you have a really big problem. Our kids are not graduating. We live in Rock Springs, and our kids are not interested in education because they can work in the mines. But we need to, my daughter has just started homeschooling. I'm big choice for education because what we're doing is not working. The agenda that's being pushed in our school is frightening. I've seen it firsthand. We got to go in with the new STEM, and I love science. I taught science for a number of years. I'm a big literacy advocate. I have a minor in literacy and a minor in science. And my reading books, they took out all of the presidents out of our history the year that I was there. They took all of our novels out of our schools. And the whole way that I learned to teach and teaching was fun. And they learned. They've taken it out. And they pushed an agenda that is frightening. One of the questions, I'm sorry, I won't take up much time, but one of the questions that I'll just tell you very quickly that was on one of the tests in high school for the new core education was, if you had a doctor, a parent, and a child, a mother and a child, a doctor, a lawyer, and an elderly person in a boat, who would you sacrifice first in order to have the most, how many people would survive? And of course, the elderly was the first thing that you sacrificed, and then the child. And you went on for education. The doctor was the last one. And when our children are faced with something that ridiculous in a class, in a test, where they have to choose who survives and whose life is more important than others, we have a real problem. So,
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for that. And so it's obvious we're all here for very personal reasons, right? We have our own reasons for being here, but they all relate to our children. And I want you to have 2 takeaways tonight, hopefully, that I can help you with. First of all is I want you to know that you as individuals can make a difference. That cliche of one person can make a difference, it's not really a cliche, it's true. And the other takeaway that I want you to have is to kind of give you some basic education advocacy 101. And we'll talk about how you can get your own group started, or you as individuals can make a difference, and how to go about that. So we're not working, Mandy. Of course, we're having technical difficulties. Let's see what we can do here. Yeah, that's not, no. We'll pause for a sec. Here we go. Let's see, that worked that time. Let's hope the clicker works. All right, so what I just said, ordinary people can accomplish extraordinary things. Together, think what you can do collectively and the difference that you can make. But what we want to do at the end of the day is empower parents over their child's education, because parents know best what their child needs. And that's what we need to remember in this whole discussion. Austin's going to see if we're actually going to make it. All right, so today I have on white, and it's after Labor Day. That's because I'm a bit of a rule breaker. And it does you well to be a bit of a rule breaker, a bit of a firebrand to get things done. But really, to be a strong education advocate, all you need is a bit more grit, a bit more moxie, and a bit more rebel. So think in terms of that. And yes, public education is very powerful, but I don't want you to be intimidated. You actually can make a difference without being really knowledgeable on the education landscape or what's going on in the country or the different policies that are out there. You can learn all that. But if you've got some of these characteristics right here, you'll be just fine. You don't have to have all of them, but these are very helpful characteristics to have to help you get through this. And I'm going to tell you a story about 2 dads who together had a lot of those characteristics, and they were fed up in Utah with the lack of choice in education. They were 2 very successful businessmen, and they were friends, And they felt like that their own children needed more choice in education, but they were also concerned about the underserved population of children as well, and what their choices were and where they went to school, and what was going to be the future of our country if our children do not get a high quality education. So they had passion about school choice, and they had a vision that we should be able to change the landscape and have more options. That's all they started with. They were not experienced in the education policy world. They weren't political themselves, but they decided we're going to hit the pavement and we're going to figure this out. So they started to network and to talk to people, and they literally went up to the state capitol and they started walking in the doors of legislators. It was during a legislative session. This was back in about 2001, and asking them, what's going on in school policy? Why don't we have choice in education? What are you doing as legislators? What can we do? And they realized very, very quickly that in order to affect change in education, it was going to involve policy. So how do you do that? Well, they started to network with some national groups, national school choice advocacy groups, start to educate themselves about how do we go about this? How can we change policy? And there's some formulas for it. They're very simple. They're not necessarily easy, but they're simple. And what they needed to do was build strong relationships with policymakers. Well, how do you do that? Well, sure, you can meet with them, you can talk to them, you can connect with them, but at the end of the day, you really have to get involved in campaigns and elections. So that's what they did. They started fundraising from their friends. Again, they were successful businessmen, so they started talking to key people who were aligned to the same idea that we need school choice, and they started to fundraise. As they started to fundraise, the national groups got interested, and they started to donate money and help them with their advocacy. And they started to actually go out and find individuals like yourself who were aligned to this belief of choice in education and ask them to run for office. And this was for the 2004 elections. So in the meantime, while they were doing this, they were also starting to advocate for policy. And the first policy that they got involved in was charter law. We had a charter law that had been passed in 1998, but nobody was doing anything because of the way that it was written. We just had a handful of charters, districts, the state office. Nobody was interested in authorizing charters. So what they did is they put together a law that would enact a state charter board. And after that, charters in Utah grew exponentially. So they had their first success. They had built enough relationships. We already had a charter law. We had advocates for charters. And they got involved and helped push that law so that we could grow charters. And then the elections came, and they had been working really hard to get good people elected, and they got a lot of people elected. They actually got involved in the governor's race as well and helped a governor win at our state convention to become the Republican candidate because he supported choice and said he would sign a law. So he was elected. A lot of the people that they had handpicked and helped through the campaigns were elected. And so in 2005, we passed the first voucher law, which was the Carson Smith Special Needs Scholarship. This law is still in effect, and it allows kids with special needs to choose a private school that will better fit their needs. It's a rather small program, and it's limited because we have appropriation funding. We don't have an ongoing funding stream. It's a wonderful program. The audits have shown it's 100% successful, but it always has a waiting list. But it was a first step. And so then with the new legislature and pretty much figuring out we had enough votes, we did something that hadn't been done in the nation yet. We passed the first universal voucher law, meaning that all students could choose the private school of their choice with some tuition help. Now, it was not the same amount that you spend per pupil on a student in Utah. It was a lower amount, and it was also tiered based on whether or not you were economically disadvantaged. And it seemed to be a very wonderful law, well thought out, hard work, got it passed. Then we had a defeat. And the defeat came from the teachers' union. Obviously, they fought us tooth and nail on even getting the law passed. But then they rallied the forces and they put it on, they got enough signatures to put it on a ballot. And so we went head to head with them. The NEA came in, funded them with big dollars, and ultimately in 2007, they took that law away from us. So then we had to step back and say, what will we do? Well, I had joined the organization in 2006, and by 2007, I was the board chair. So this was a big defeat for us, and we had to think, well, what will we do? Well, at the end of the day, what we did was stuck to our mission, our vision, and our policy principles, and we moved ahead and continued to have great success. And I'll share some of that as we go along, but I wanted to share the story of how two dads who'd never been involved in policy or politics or fundraising or any of those things for that matter were able to move forward and start to build an organization and make a difference. And from there, we had to pivot a little bit and reevaluate and really grow the strength of our organization so that we could move forward. All right, so you're going to create an organization. The first thing that you have to do is develop your mission and your values. And so tonight we're going to use Parents for Choice in Education as your example to give you an idea. This is going to be the core and the basis of everything you do. When you decide to get involved in a policy, expend money, fundraise, whatever it is your organization does, you need to stick to your mission and your values. So you can see what those are up there. I won't read them out, of course, but what I will say is that you can see from our values that we respect parents and what their role is in their child's education, and that every child deserves access to a quality education, and that education excellence is achieved through choice, accountability, and 21st century innovations. All right, so this is Parents for Choice in Education. This may not be what your group decides to have your mission or your values say, but it will probably be something similar, but I wanted to give you an idea. All right, and then what do you do after that? You've got your mission, you've got your values. Well, you've got to build your roadmap for success. How am I going to get there? If we want to deliver this mission and we want to have those things happen, we have to have a pathway to get there. So what I've shared here are 6 areas of focus. Defining what you do, this is the PCE roadmap. So this is what we do. We promote policy, we get involved in campaigns and elections, we develop grassroots support, we build strong coalitions, we educate, and then you can't forget, because without that bottom one, fundraising, you won't get anything done. But don't let that intimidate you either. There are ways to do that. All right, so as a group, you need to decide, what are we going to get involved in and do? What are we going to do? This is what we do, and it seems to have worked pretty well. Okay, so we're going to go through each of those and break it down for you and give you an idea of what I'm talking about when I list those out. Number 1 is promote policy. As we talked earlier, these two dads started PCE, and they discovered right from the get-go that change is going to require policy change. And so you define your principles. We'll get to those in a minute, and I'll share what our policy principles are. And then after you do that, you initiate, you advocate, and you lobby for those policies within your principles. So what can we do? What does that mean, promote policy? You start by developing your annual legislative agenda. It could be one tiny thing, just one tiny thing. Or as you get more powerful and successful, it can be a whole plethora of items. You partner with legislators. Why? Because you've developed relationships, and we'll talk more about that. And you actively get engaged in crafting. You don't say, Senator so-and-so or Representative so-and-so, will you run this bill for us? And they say, oh, sure, I support choice. And then you just think they're going to run with it. If you want that policy to be good, I can tell you, you'll become their best friend by helping craft it. Now, obviously, they work with what's called legislative research, but legislative research can take points and synopsis and ideas that you have, or even model legislation that you've discovered, and you can morph it and work it to fit your state, your policy needs, and also what you think that you can pass. So be involved in it all the way from beginning to end. Then share and promote that with your supporters, and we're going to talk a little bit about building your supporter base later. But you need to engage them in lobbying for passage. I will give you a really great example of how we engaged our supporters one year. We passed the statewide online education program, which is a bill that allows high schoolers statewide to take classes online from a provider, and the funding follows the student to the course. It's a big deal. It was the first of its kind in the nation. And it was fought against very hard, but we won by 1 vote in the House. And then the union started pushing back on the governor to veto it. And they pushed hard. So he told our bill sponsor, I'm thinking of vetoing this bill. So our bill sponsor called an emergency meeting with him and brought us along, and we all sat down at the table with all of his staff. And he wanted a better understanding, but he wasn't comfortable with it. Well, in the meantime, we had galvanized our supporters. We had a database of over 240,000. And we sent out the word, and they inundated the governor's office with phone calls and emails. While we were sitting waiting for our meeting with the governor, the phone was ringing nonstop. And the secretary was writing down, okay, I'll tell the governor you support it. Okay, I'll tell the governor not to veto it. And we even shut down their email system. So they were just flooded. We got the message out. Ultimately, at the end of the day, he did not veto the bill. So you need to engage your supporters, and then finally you need to earn a seat at the table and become a respected voice, so that when you want to get that meeting with the governor or the speaker or the president of the Senate, that you have earned a seat at the table and you're respected. So I promised I would talk about our policy principles. So here they are. We never wavered from these. If somebody contacted us and said, will you help support X bill or Y bill? If it did not fit in this, we did not do it. So they are increasing choice, empowering parents, transparency and accountability, efficiency in funding, promoting quality instruction, and promoting innovative solutions for education. We never strayed from that. You don't want to spread yourself too thin, and you need to stay focused on what your principles are. So number 2, campaigns and elections. And we already talked about this in reference to those 2 dads starting our organization. Literally, the number 1 way to impact education policy is to build strong relationships with policymakers. All right, so how do we do that? I've touched on that lightly, but again, recruit and support strong, like-minded candidates. That's right, get in there and recruit them and help them. Don't think that your opponents don't do that. The teachers union does that. Everybody does that. The developers do that. The home builders association, the banks, the credit unions. So then donate your time, your feet on the ground, and if you can, money to their campaigns. Assist with their messaging and marketing if that helps. And more importantly, get out the vote. Again, that database of supporters, you need to engage them and make sure that they're actively supporting and assisting those candidates to get them elected. And it may not be candidates, it may be incumbents. There may be wonderful incumbents out there who are aligned to your initiatives. Support them and be there for them. All right, the number 3, the grassroots support. Very, very important to a successful organization. And all of you who are interested, you can bring friends and acquaintances to the table in this cause. Your credibility and influence is expanded exponentially by how the depth and breadth of your supporter base. And so it's very important. So how do we get those supporters? Well, you recruit them and you collect information. We attended our GOP conventions, our organizing conventions for Utah. That worked wonderfully. I'm not sure what would work for Wyoming, but our conventions meet every year. So we would take our table and our materials, our marketing materials and our banner, and we'd plant ourselves, and we have other people roaming through the convention, pulling people over to our booth, so we could tell them about what we do and what we want to accomplish and why it's important. And if they were supporters, which many of them were, and said, I love this, I want to help, or I want to be part of it. If they didn't say that, we'd say, do you want to help? Do you want to be part of it? And then we would gather their information. And you want to gather a lot of information because you want to know what legislative district they live in so that you can call on them to help a candidate or to lobby a legislator up on the Hill. So you gather as much information as you can. Another way to recruit them is social media today. We didn't have that early on. We started using that more over the years, but then just some of the old-fashioned ways, which I think Parents Unite is using now, if I'm correct. Just some good old calling organizations that have parents, trying to get them to network and share names, cold calling, just whatever way you can figure out, do it. And then you want a dynamic platform to hold all that information. You want to have a platform that you can pull data from so that when you need legislators to call when you need supporters to call certain legislators on the Hill, that you can easily extract, well, who are their constituents? Because I don't always care if it's not my constituent calling me, right? So you need to have a database where you can extract information. Maybe these supporters have a child that needs choice or has a great story. You would have that in the database, so you could pull that. You're going to go present in front of a committee and you need parents and families, have that in your database. So very important to keep that information. And then message your supporters regularly. Always be communicating with them with various types of communication. Email, social media, news blasts. Make sure they're informed about what is going on. Also hold events to build and galvanize your base. So we would have an annual gala. We would have a lot of different things on the Hill, like School Choice Day on the Hill, Digital Learning Day on the Hill, Carson Smith Special Needs Scholarship Day on the Hill. We'd have all of these events to galvanize them. Sometimes we'd do things in the summer like have a carnival, something to bring them out, get them excited, get them networked, get them feeling like this is important, I belong to something. And then engage them for advocacy of policy, which we've already talked about. So number 4 is, in addition to your grassroots supporters, you need to build a really strong coalition. So I've got some ideas for you for how to do that. Every state's going to be different. But basically, you want to unite like-minded groups and organizations within your state. I'll have a slide in a minute that shows what that looked like in Utah. So if there are any groups out there that are like-minded, that are homeschoolers or other policy groups, other education groups that you think would be aligned to you, then you want to bring them all under the tent, charters, whomever it is. Then you want to also network with the national school choice and innovation groups. So there are a lot of national groups out there that are advocating nationally for the very same things you are in your state. In fact, they're advocating and helping states pass these laws. Find out who they are and network with them. They can be an incredible resource to you. And then you recruit your thought leaders and your community leaders. So you think, who do people look up to in this state? Is it a prominent businessman or a political person, a mayor, whoever it is? Try to network with these people and pull them under your tent. And then build diversity through your partnerships. And I'll show you a bit what I mean by that, because I've put together a list here. Let me step back just a little bit so you can all see it. If you look through the national groups there, these are the names of some of the most prominent groups that even you guys could reach out to and ask for their help. Start to connect with them. They'll be interested. They'll want to talk to you. EdChoice, the American Federation for Children, the Foundation for Excellence in Education, that's Jeb Bush's group, Goldwater, Reason Foundation, the Institute for Justice. They're wonderful when you're putting your group together and you're trying to figure out your structure that allows you to be involved in campaigns and lobby and do advocacy and fundraise. And then here's just some other groups. I won't list them all out. And then on the state side that you can see who we aligned ourselves with. The Utah Association of Public Charter Schools, the Utah Private Schools. If your private schools don't have a coalition, you just start reaching out to them independently. The Utah Home Education Association, the Hispanic coalitions. We have some other groups that you can see the names of them there. Americans for Prosperity is new to Utah. We have a group called the Utah Technology Council, and these are the tech groups. Utah has a booming tech market happening right now. Tech companies are popping up right and left, and so they actually helped us pass some of our most prominent policy. The ed tech companies, and for us, the Utah GOP was huge. It's in their platform that they support school choice. And then, of course, we've got special needs policies, and so those different communities involved in special needs. So this is just to give you an idea. Your state will be unique, but you just need to start brainstorming. Who can we pull under the tent? All right, and then number 5 is to educate. So in order to actually build a case for why you need policy, You have to use facts, you have to use stories, examples, and then you have to have solutions. You can't just say we need to change it if you can't offer up a solution. So I've got some ideas over here. First of all, you need to create your brand for messaging and marketing. What do you look like? Establish what it is, your little icon, your colors, when people see that, they need to know, this is Parents Unite, I recognize that. So that's the first thing out of the chute, is to brand yourself. And then, I cannot emphasize enough regular communication to your base. And I don't care if your base is only 50 people, start communicating with them. Part of that communicating may be challenging them to bring 5 friends into the group. So you do that through those various ways. And again, I want to emphasize this. Share state education facts and data. Why do we need choice? You know what your opponents will argue. We'll start to talk about the per pupil funding versus the outcomes. What's your graduation rate? How are kids performing on their proficiency exams? Let's start talking about those things so that we can build a case for why we need choice, change, improvement. And make sure that you share what the policy landscape is. You need to share with them your policy goals, talk about current events in education, give them legislative updates. So before every legislative session, we would start messaging, here's what we're going to be running in this session, here's what we need your support on. List it out, we would start messaging them more frequently, and then we gave them updates through the whole session. We actually put a tracker together with links to all the bills so they could click and see where it was in the process. So we tried to make it really easy for them. We would provide them with links to all of their legislators, which is in Utah, it's on the legislative website, to make sure that they could click, find their legislator, find their phone number, find their email. So you help your supporters be prepared, but communicate with them all the time. And then tell the stories. Tell the stories to everyone. Tell the stories to the press. Tell the stories to the policymakers. Bring the children and the families up there. Present in legislative committees. Align yourself with legislators who are going to make sure that you get on a committee agenda. So share real stories using real children and real families. And then, again, I'm coming back to hold events so that you can inform and educate and energize not only your supporters, but policymakers in your community. And you can also partner with your network when applicable on these. So we held a gala every year, and it was also a fundraiser. It was a big deal. It was a dress-up event, and the speakers we brought in were very engaging. So we brought in Jeb Bush one year. We brought in John Stossel one year. We brought in Tony Bennett, and you may not know who that is, but he was Chiefs of Change at the time, and he was heading that at the time, and he was really one of the best speakers we ever brought. We also brought the superintendent, the superintendent of public instruction from Louisiana at the time. So just a whole bunch of different people strong on choice, strong on education policy. And we partnered with one of those groups I showed you earlier, a national group, Ed Policy, formerly called the Friedman Foundation, and they would actually fund our event for us. So then anything we fundraised was gravy on top of that for us. So that's what I mean when I say your network can partner with you on these things. Okay, we talked about some of those other things, and then take advantage of earned media opportunities. You need to start talking to the media. If you're established and respected, even if you're small and in the early stages, look for media opportunities and start to become the trusted voice so that when there's an education event happening in the state, who are they going to come to? We want them to come to you. In Utah, they come to Parents for Choice in Education for comment. Build your profile. And then again, utilize your networks as a resource. Okay. Then the final one, fundraising. Okay, it requires diligence, so much diligence, tenacity, creativity, and it is literally your lifeline to viability. So how do you fundraise? Well, again, creativity, tenacity, diligence. You can start with advocacy organizations. Those two dads, when they started getting serious, they had success with the charter law, they were starting to recruit legislators, then the national group stepped in, the national advocacy organizations, and started to help them with funding. Grant-making organizations, there's so many grant-making organizations out there, so you need to tap into them. We tapped into the Daniels Fund and the Hume Foundation at the time. Foundations, family foundations, whatever kind of foundations that you can find, philanthropists. There was a wonderful man named Dan Peters. He's part of the Philanthropy Roundtable. He wanted digital learning to happen, and he gave us a lot of funding when we were running the statewide online education program. Your database of supporters, even if they're only going to give you $10, reach out to them and ask for their help. Individuals, so there's got to be people in your state who have deep pockets, who believe the things that you believe, and you have to be well-polished and well-versed to go pitch why you need their help and see if you can't find some strong funders within your own state to help you. Fundraisers and events, so you can hold, especially if you can find one of your networks to partner and help pick up the costs of your event so that anything that you make on top of it is for you. Corporate sponsors, we had some corporate sponsors. We had some charter management companies who would contribute to us. So that gives you an idea. And once you start having successes, that's the key. I mean, you have to do all those things we've already talked about. You have to have your mission, you have to have your values and your policy principles, and you have to start to get involved and have some successes, be organized, know what you're going to advocate for, and then you can go and get some help from these organizations. All right, then I wanted to just give you an idea of the policy, some of our larger policy successes that we've had, what we've accomplished. As I shared, it was 2004 when we changed the charter law. We now have 120 charter schools, but actually it turns out to be 140 because some of those are networks. So we have authorized about 120 charter schools. That is really took off. So 2004 that happened. It was about 2007, 2008 when they really started to take off. So in about 10 years, we're up to roughly 140 schools. The Carson Smith Special Needs Program was 2005. Universal Vouchers was 2006. Repealed. Don't worry, choice is always on our table and we'll be back. But it's not going to be vouchers. It'll probably be something that's evolved, like ESAs, something different that we're looking at. Open enrollment. That was one of, after all of this happened, that's really a good starting place. We have open enrollment so students can attend any district and any school. We put very minimum regulations to keep schools from saying no, and it's all about their maximum enrollment. And there's a formula that they have in law. And if they're at that, then they can say no. But this allows students to choose within the public school system. So it's really a great law to start with. The statewide online education program was ranked the #1 digital learning policy in the nation at the time, and what it did is it placed parents and students in the driver's seat with no interference from their school and district. Their school and district has no say. The parameters are outlined in the law, and that is that. The district cannot stop them from taking these courses. It's choice to the course, and the funding follows the student, which rarely happens. So that funding that follows them to the district, if they choose to take a couple of their courses needed for graduation from the statewide online education program, that funding follows. They're not going to be taking the courses at their school anymore. And it actually, if you proportion the funding out, it's a smaller amount. So the school actually gets to keep something, and they don't even have to teach the kid that course. Don't think they didn't fight it, though, even though they come out the benefactor. We did school grading. We did a student achievement backpack. Our state has a very robust data system. They received major federal grant money. It collects a lot of information about the student, and we felt like that the parent had the right to have access to that information as well, and so that's what that law was about. We did a lot of different union policy. You have to be strategic, and you have to be respectful of your allies, and you always have to act professional, but there are some people that are always going to be your enemy, and you might as well go after them, because as long as they're powerful, they're going to try to take you down. So that's why we did some union policy to try to cripple them a bit. We did teacher effectiveness evaluation. We did some early childhood education program amendments, and what those were is we actually brought some accountability to some funding that was happening through K-3 reading, where our K-3 children were not coming out reading, but the schools were still getting the money. So we changed that. And then we had competency-based education amendments because we're trying to move down a more innovative path. That's what the statewide online education program was for, as well, was to try to bring more innovation into our education system and start to personalize learning for students. So now that I've given you 101 and some basic, a little basic course on how to get your organization up and running, I just want to end on this note that we cannot underestimate the importance of empowering our students over their learning pathways through choice and innovative options. Without choice in education, students are stuck in a one-size-fits-all approach that is unable to meet their individual academic needs and to prepare them for a 21st century workforce. That's really it in a nutshell. We've got to prepare these kids. This is about the students. It's not about the system anymore. For too long, it's been about the system, and it needs to be about kids. We need to prepare them and send them out the door, ready to face college, ready to face jobs, ready to get the jobs that are out there in our economy today. But most importantly, we need to empower them over their pathway. It's their pathway. And we need to be more innovative in how we approach education. We need to rethink how we do it. And I also don't want you to go away thinking we have to blow up the public education system, because we don't, and it's never going to happen. But they need to rethink how they're educating our children. Good change can come in public education too. Good change and options can be provided within that system. We need to make them accountable, and we need to make them be more innovative. I just came from Houston, where I was at a board meeting, and I went and visited the most amazing school that was a magnet of the Houston district. It's a very innovative, what's called blended learning and project-based learning, and I watched these kids being, as I keep saying, empowered over their pathway. There was an energy and an excitement in that school. The kids were loving learning. Not only that, their teachers were loving teaching. We had an opportunity to meet with teachers. They met in a hub in the center of where they taught the children, and they were divided into cohorts. So these teachers are in this hub, and branching out from it are their classrooms, and it's all this very open space. Now the hub was as closed off, but all the open space had doors where they can open and close them for whatever needs. So it was not a sit and get moment. It was not a sage on the stage moment. That old-fashioned way that we do education. It was collaborative, it was together. So we sat with these teachers and they were literally giddy about what they were doing. That's what we want to see. And that can happen in charters, that can happen in private schools, that can happen in our traditional schools. But we need people like you to get in there and make a difference. And you can do it. So hopefully you go away tonight feeling like it doesn't matter that I'm just a regular person. I can make a difference. So I thank you for your time. And I think we're going to have some questions. Maybe some online questions or questions from you. Yes.
The organization, the way you put the organization together, I could see how that would work very well. But I want to talk to you about the school choice programs themselves. Don't you find that there are a lot of parents that don't understand that process and are afraid of the change? I see where a lot of parents consider school to be a babysitting service for them. And for them to have school choice or to take advantage of school choice, all of a sudden now the parent has to be active in the education of the child. And a lot of parents just are too busy, or they don't want to do it, or they just want to send their kids to the babysitter. What have you found in the time that you've worked with this school choice to get the parents want to be active want to put the effort to provide a good education for their children?
That's a good question. And first of all, I always have faith first and foremost in parents. But I will tell you that as a society, we have been conditioned by one government school system. And we have been conditioned to the point that we basically get up in the morning, send our student off to school, don't think about it. Many parents don't even think about what's happening in that school. Then they come home at night, you help them with their homework, and you repeat. And when a parent is, the greasy wheel, you get pushed back, right? You get reprimanded or told, we know what we're doing, don't get involved. The PTA's over here if you want to be involved. So there's a conditioning process. We have to undo that conditioning. But I will tell you that anywhere in the nation where choice has been passed and initiated, there are plenty of parents chomping at the bit to have it, and those programs fill up quickly. I mean, look at Utah. We already have roughly 140 charters, and they're full. We have absorbed about 11% of the student population from the regular traditional system into charters. And they want more. They want more options. The Carson Smith Special Needs Scholarships in a lottery. But now I'll give you a perspective when you say, but parents, they want to use it as babysitting or they just don't know how to get involved. I also started a charter school, and it's a high school. And we had a group of very at-risk kids come to us every year that I was there. What happened is we were one of the only charter high schools in the area. And so districts pushed a lot of their kids who were just about to become dropouts to us. Get them off the rolls, send them to us. Well, imagine getting a senior who hardly has any credits. With that came a lot of parents who didn't know how to be engaged. But we had a very strong culture. We had a very strong onboarding process. And we had a motto of 3 legs of the stool. It's the student, it's the parent, and it's the school employees, whoever we were, administration, teachers. And we pulled them in from the beginning with strong onboarding, strong outreach. We communicated with them constantly. The only way that you can help parents to engage and get excited and start to get involved in their education, if they're not already, because many parents are very, very involved, is to be patient and to help them along the way and to respect them. So we communicated so much, me as the principal, my vice principal, the office, the teachers constantly. Every student had a success coach. So they were getting phone calls and emails, and it was like, what is happening? I've never had this happen in my child's education. And most of them loved it. Many of them said to us, stop communicating with us. This is ridiculous. We can't handle one more communication, to which we'd say, nope, we don't apologize for it. There's 3 legs to the stool, and you're one of them. And we will continue to communicate and talk with you. And over time, that's what they came to expect. So you can't expect this change overnight, but I will tell you that even states that have incredible school choice options like Florida for very at-risk groups, these parents from low-income families, maybe a single mom, may live in really difficult parts of town, will move heaven and earth for their child to have an opportunity because they know it's their only ticket out. And so, yes, there are always going to be parents who aren't ready for that or don't know how to do that. When you create policy, make your policy very easy for them. Like our statewide online education program, if they went into their districts and had to go through them as the mechanism, they were going to get pushed away. We already knew that. They were going to get told, you don't want that, that's crappy, don't do that. So we bypassed them. And we made it very easy for them to go to a website, and nobody gives them pushback. They choose their course, they choose, it's all systems go. So you want to make sure that you make it easy for them to find those choices, to sign up for those choices, to be involved. And then, until we can shift the paradigm away from the traditional mindset, that's what we have to do. So I ran a charter. Charters have an emphasis. They're usually more innovative, and they usually have a strong onboarding process because they have to go out and recruit students. So you start to see some of that there. But even with our traditional schools, they've got to look at how they handle that differently. And that's what you can be a voice for. So that was a very long answer. I hope I gave you some good information. Any other questions?
My question is about the charter boards. So there's a concern from opponents of school choice that I've heard, which is that if you make it easier for charters to become charters, you'll have too many. And schools will fail and children will fail with them. So I wonder what your opinion is on that point.
So my opinion is we want all kinds of ideas and innovation, and we don't want to be too restrictive. So when you go to write a charter law, there are so many charter laws across the nation. There are best practices. There's model legislation that you can look at. But you can look at how your charter board is appointed or elected or whatever it is, and make sure that those are avenues that you know you're going to get strong candidates, innovative people with a mindset for choice and innovation. And then your law, usually what happens is a law tries to stay somewhat thin, and depending on your constitution, like ours in Utah, is that the State Board of Education has general oversight. So legislators have to be careful what lines they can cross. We put some strong guidelines in, and then we had to leave up a lot of the rules to the State Board of Education. But we also got involved in State Board education races. So we had a pretty good board at the time when they were doing that. So, you know, I'm not a proponent of being too restrictive. I am a strong believer that parents will vote with their feet. And if the parent's happy, then the child's probably happy. And there is compliance. Anyway, in our state there is, and I would guess that in a law that you had, it would be the same. Charters are public schools. As an administrator, I was subject to all the same compliance as all the other public schools. So that you're turning in data all the time. They're watching you. You can't be willy-nilly, not teaching any curriculum. I mean, you have to do certain things. And so, you know, there are already safeguards in place. You have to understand your law. You have to understand how your State Board of Education works, and you have to make sure you know all of these things. But people might disagree with me, but I will never be a proponent of being too restrictive.
I don't want to take all the time.
Okay, we'll let a couple other people, and then we can come back to you. Did you have a question? Okay.
Oh, okay. I'm a parent here, and I've only been here since October, so Wyoming is very new to me. The education system here is very new to me. We adopted my biological granddaughter about 8 years ago. Her mother died when she was 6 months old. Her father was my son, and he passed away in February. And she's special needs. How does a charter school coexist with special needs, and exactly what is a blended education?
I'll tell you what blended is, and then I may call on one of our guests here tonight to share a little bit about how charters handle students with special needs. Is that okay? So I'll start by telling you what blended education is. So blended is giving your student more control over time, place, path, and pace. You usually have digital curriculum involved, and what happens is you're allowing a student's education to be personalized to them. So instead of us all working at the same pace, at the same time, on the same thing, because the teacher's up in front of the class and said, I want this turned in by the end of day or tomorrow morning, you're working on your pathway with your curriculum, and then your teachers are doing more of a mentor to you to watch how you're moving through the curriculum, help you, et cetera. Now that may not be, depending on what type of blend it is, that may only be a portion of what you do. And you may also have some teacher-led instruction. Then you may have some collaborative work with groups. But what you're doing is you're blending digital with bricks and mortar. And you're giving more flexibility. So I'll give you an example. My school, Career Path High, was a blended learning flex model, which meant it was the most flexible model of blended learning. My kids were working independently on their curriculum. They also had some project-based learning as a group, and they had some cross-curricular work as a group. They were also in college programs as junior and senior, which is why we chose this model of education, because I needed them to be able to move on their pathway in their high school curriculum as quickly as they wanted or on their schedule. A lot of our kids worked, or they were working on their college, so maybe they did their high school English at 7 o'clock at night. Maybe they got up at 8 a.m. and worked on their history for an hour. It could be completely flexible. Then they would also come into the school to do the group work or to work with their teacher face-to-face. So that's what blended learning is. It's opening a whole door of innovation and flexibility for how you can personalize learning and try different things. More collaboration, more group learning. Okay, and I'm going to let him share a little bit in Wyoming how you deal with special ed as a charter.
Yeah, so my name is Nick Avila. I'm here with Marcos Martinez. We are here with from Podair Academy, the only charter school in Cheyenne and also the first. We have 2 charter schools now. It's elementary and a secondary school. With regards to special needs students, we are bound by the same policies and rules as the public schools. So as a public school, we accept students of all different backgrounds, and we do get a lot of special needs students. And when that happens, we evaluate the IEP. We, as a team, we look at what's in the IEP, what the needs are.
An IEP is individualized education plan.
Yeah.
Okay.
We do have a whole team, a special education team. We evaluate each student within the program to see what kind of needs they have. And then we assemble a plan with the parents and with the specialists in the school to, develop a plan that's going to enable the students to be successful. So we do definitely serve students of a lot of different backgrounds, and we are held accountable just like the other schools.
So did that answer your question? Was that helpful a little bit?
Yes, it did, but you said something about secondary charter school?
Yeah, that's for the older kids, 6th grade through 12th. So our elementary is kinder through 5th grade. And the secondary school is 6th grade through 12th grade.
So other questions? You had another one?
You talked about how the ways we could go through to make changes here in our state. And I appreciate that, but I'm asking you more about, I'm also running for the school board. So I'm educating myself here a little bit. So I imagine that the big majority of the students that choose to have the blended learning and that the non-traditional path are probably students that would go to college, and so
Necessarily, but I'll
okay.
answer that one
So
here.
and so the issue that I have is that I'm an engineer, so I have an engineering license. And I needed to go into a accredited university and go through their process to get that license so that I could practice as an engineer. So do you find that the higher education facilities are accepting of non-traditional coursework?
Oh, absolutely. And again, I was a charter school, so I had to be in compliance with the type of courses that my students had and the reporting on their completion, et cetera. And so, no, that was never an issue for us. So your blended schools or public schools, a lot of traditional districts across the nation are starting to adopt blended learning. And it's not, in many ways, it's very superior. So it's really just a methodology of delivering education. It's not really diminishing what they learn or the type of curriculum or knowledge they're gaining.
But don't you find that the universities, in order to accept someone for an engineering degree, usually have a criteria that of classes and what they and seat time in the schools that had to been met before the university considered accepting them to a program?
What they're accepting is a diploma from an accredited district or an accredited school. If you're accredited, they're going to accept it. There's criteria to get accreditation. And so no, seat time is irrelevant. In fact, seat time makes me angry. It's about knowledge. And a lot of districts across the nation are starting to look at competency because Why should I have my butt in the seat X number of hours when I love history and I can move through the curriculum like that? And once I've moved through it, I can explore even deeper curriculum. That's what we want kids to do. So we don't want to restrict them to seat time, but if seat time is a requirement for a district, you're going to have to do it. But your district gives you a diploma, your charter gives you a diploma, and they're accredited, and then the university is fine with that.
May I answer his question?
Sure.
I'm a homeschool mom. My kids are done homeschooling. You're never really done. And when they chose to go to the community college here, they didn't have to, I mean, they did take their ACTs and stuff so that they can qualify for scholarships or whatever, but they were accepted into LCCC, they enrolled, and through the years, they've been straight A students. And each homeschooling family may have a different choice of curriculum. We follow the general guidelines of the state, but we have to have this level of math or this level of science or whatever. And for the most part, the kids did higher levels of study. They did college level by the end of high school.
You were able to challenge your kids
Challenge
beyond.
my kids because I had two. I gave one-on-one attention. They were able to, when they went into college, when they took they tested at higher than college level in English and different subjects. My daughter went into nursing, and she was a straight A student, and she's a nurse now. My son is a history student. He's in his last semester, and he's carried a 4.0. And he's a student with learning disabilities. So because I was able to choose, I could homeschool.
Personalize their learning.
I personalized their learning. I could challenge them and take them at their speed.
Right.
And if my daughter applied to the University of Wyoming and did the RN to BSN program and completed it in 3 years, the whole thing.
Well, congratulations.
And she finished her bachelor's this year. So universities do accept even homeschool students.
Sure, they absolutely do. And there is a long-standing history of homeschooling students being some of the finest students and scoring the highest on entrance exams. And I applaud you for the wonderful job you've done with your children.
It was a blessing and a privilege to be able to do that because I didn't have to work. My husband provided, so I could focus on the
Right,
kids.
you did work. You educated
I
your
educated
children,
the
so
kids.
that's wonderful.
My question to you is, how does school choice help homeschool families? I'm done, but I'd like to be a voice for homeschoolers in terms of funding and other things, because we're
Right.
homeschoolers and we are on our own.
Right. So, for instance, in Utah, the statewide online education program, we made sure that homeschoolers could also participate in that. And homeschoolers can sometimes, you're very protective about your children and what districts may want to impose on you, and I understand that as well. One of the new waves of school choice in the nation are education savings accounts, or ESAs, and we've had several states pass those already. They're in their very early stages: Nevada, Arizona, Florida. I can't remember all of the rest of them right now off the top of my head. But in those circumstances, a lot of the thought is that we'll also be able to let homeschoolers participate in those as well, and you'll be able to take the funding that would normally go to your student, and you'll be able to use it for various services. So to purchase curriculum, anything related to their education and getting them the education they need to move on after the 12th grade equivalent. And so that is one way that it could help homeschoolers.
ESA is something that's
Education savings accounts. Yeah, you can.
the state provides, or how does that?
Well, so it'll vary across states, so I would encourage you to look up the various states that are doing it, and usually they'll have a profile of the law that's easy to read, and you can see they may have a very specific demographic that they're serving right now, or a specific amount of money, which usually isn't the full funding amount, and it may even be based on economic, whether you're economically disadvantaged or not. So states can come up with a plethora of ways to write these laws, but the basic understanding is that we're now going to open it up and let you control your pathway and give you more options for how you use the money for your education, and that would benefit homeschoolers. I would also say that Parents for Choice in Education, and hopefully Parents Unite would do the same thing, is be a strong advocate for the homeschooler to protect their right to homeschool their children. And so they would want your voice at the table. They would want you under the tent, because in Utah, we've done multiple things to not only open up avenues for homeschoolers and participating in sports at their local school, the statewide online education program, but to literally protect their rights to be homeschoolers as well.
My wife is the manager for licensing at the state level for private schools and charter schools. She tells me that the decisions for applications and the reviews are at the district control level. Is that the same for Utah? Because if it's not the same, then we'd have to go through more obstacles to do what you're
Yeah, no,
applying.
licensing is at the district level as well. But we also, and Utah's done a lot of innovative things just recently on alternative routes to licensure. So that if I have a bachelor's in math, and I'm really good at it, and I want to teach in the school, but I did not go through the College of Education and become a certified teacher, I can start teaching today, and I can get on a pathway, on an alternative route to licensure that's not, it's of course, it's what the standards the State Board of Education have determined are good, but it's not so rigorous that it's off-putting and that you'd never want to go down that pathway, and you can actually work at the same time. These are good solutions as well, but yes, licensure happens at the district level as well. There are basic licensure rules,
Right.
for sure.
She said that not all states are equal. Some states, they don't do it at the district level. I don't know which states. I didn't know if Utah was the same.
Yeah, you know, they've just got to pass their certification exam, and then they're licensed.
Same here, okay. so
Yeah,
that's good.
yeah. Okay, let me just ask about time quick, what you want me to do. Are there some questions from Facebook, or should we take one of those?
All right, this question is coming to us from Douglas. Her name's Catherine. She's concerned that charter schools are only successful because they get to pick the cream of the crop for their student body. What are your thoughts on that?
So in Utah, we have a very diverse group of charters, and obviously parents are voting with their feet. But I will tell you from personal experience that I had a very economically and academically disadvantaged group of kids come to me in my school. That made up the majority of the population. I also had 24% in my first year of special ed students. They were highly functional, autistic, and Asperger's kids. So I blew that idea up with my own school. But there are lots of schools in our inner city and in areas where very economically disadvantaged children live that are thriving. And apparently they wouldn't consider those kids the cream of the crop, which is a bit of an offensive term anyway. But I get what she's saying. I respect what she's saying. But at the same time, no, there are plenty of examples that show that that's not true. Time-wise, how much longer do you want us to go? 2 more? Okay.
So actually, I want to address that point really fast, and then I have another point to address. I think the majority of charter schools throughout the country, throughout the United States, are schools that will welcome anyone into their school, including ours, our 2 schools.
They have to. They
And
usually
have
run
to.
by a lottery system. You
Exactly.
never get to choose your student.
Exactly. And so whoever walks through those doors, we serve. And if the majority of charter school leaders have the same mentality of whoever walks through those doors, we're going to serve those students, period. But going on to the next thing, I want to invite anyone, but especially the people who are running for office, locally, statewide, citywide, however, to come to see our schools, because there's plenty of people who have not came and visited our 2 charter schools in Cheyenne, and we would love to have you. We have an open door policy. We welcome tours at any time, and we would love to see you there. There is the possibility, there is always that temptation of when you join a school board to conform with what's going on with the rest of the group or what's the dominant mentality there. And I challenge you to come see our school first. And then, if you get elected, to bring in that school choice mentality to the school board, because it's only going to benefit the students, and it's only going to benefit the city and the district as a whole.
And I know in speaking to you last night that you also have a lot of students that are somewhat at risk.
We
Coming
get
to
the
you.
most challenging students.
Right.
I don't want to use the term cream of the crop, because you're right.
Because, and I'll take any student. I loved every kid. I don't care where they came from. They were welcome in our doors.
But we get the most challenging students of any school. I'll probably say that. So I can't say that loud enough to people that talk about the cream of the crop.
Right. Yeah, that's a tactic and a talking point that's been used by those who don't want to see choice or charters, the teachers union. But there's so many charters out there now that we can just blow that one up. So one more question over here. You want to wait for the mic and then they can hear you?
Sure.
Okay.
Wyoming is a little bit anemic in its economy based on minerals. When you introduced school choice in Utah, I imagine you affected the economy somewhat. Do you have any ideas how much economic activity generated around charter schools?
Quite a bit, absolutely, with building and jobs. Speaking of anemic, we're not anemic. We actually have a booming economy, but we're still the lowest funded in the nation. So I think you guys spend a lot more per student than we do. But, you know, I have to be honest, I don't have any numbers for that. But what I will tell you that what helps your economy is school choice. Because when we have, like I told you, we have a tech industry that's exploding. And when all of those employees come from out of state to come and live in Utah and take those jobs, they want to know that there's choice. They want to know there's private choice and charters and that we're doing innovative things. So that's an economic driver right there. So I think that's the last of our questions. Thank you for your good questions and thank you for your attendance.
Thank you, Robin. Thank you for sharing your knowledge and experience with us. There is a bunch of handouts outside, and for the Facebook Live, obviously, we can post some information. But for everybody here, we encourage you. A lot of those questions are answered on those handouts, and we encourage you to grab those as you are leaving. Thank you again. Hopefully, we will see everybody again next month. Dates to be determined. Follow us on Facebook. All our information will be posted. Thank you again.